How are things on the West Coast?
Welcome to our behind-the-scenes tour of Spin's August issue, with technology provided by Intel. Spin's August cover features Interpol, the brooding New York City rockers whose major label debut, Our Love to Admire, hit stores this month. We sat down with Spin editor Doug Broad and deputy editor Steve Kandel to get the inside scoop on this cover story.
Spin has quite an intimate relationship with Interpol. We had Paul Banks representing the band on the cover of a Next Big Things issue a few years back when the first album came out. He shared the cover with Brody Dahl from the Distillers, Jeff Rickley from Thursday, and Justin Hawkins from The Darkness. And then we put the band on the cover of the magazine for their second album, so the entire band shared a cover. And you know, the magazine has always been really supportive of their music. They're a really great atmospheric New York guitar band.
So why put the band on the cover for essentially a third time?
I think the reason why, there are many reasons why we put them on the cover for this new album. First off, the new album is on a major label. It's their jump from Matador to Capitol, and you know, there's a lot of promotional push behind this record. I think Capitol really wants to make this into something significant.
It seems so infrequent now that you have a band that's sort of successful in a certain level that makes a big deal out of, like, okay, now we're signing to a major label. It seems like almost like a quickly antiquated storyline. So the fact that that's kind of a factor in it, when a lot of people are actually going, you know, the opposite direction, seemed like it gave it a little bit more, like there was a little bit more to talk about too.
And the album's really good, and they're a great live band. So, you know, why not?
With the band now on their third record, and with them having been featured prominently in the magazine before, Spin's editors decided a different approach would be necessary to cast a different light on Interpol this time around. The first step was sending writer David Peisner out to meet the band while they were on tour in Texas and Georgia.
We had a writer who was based down in Atlanta, Georgia, visit with them in Dallas and then also in Atlanta, which we thought were interesting places to hang out with a band like Interpol. Which, you know, and Interpol has this kind of this persona or this image as this band that's really hipster downtown New York and stylish, and just the idea of them, you know, being down south, it just seemed like an interesting juxtaposition, and, you know, playing these big radio shows, you know, among other bands like, you know, Cake and Chris Cornell. It just seemed like an interesting sort of unique way to cover the artist.
I mean, the story last time was very much about them, you know, being these like downtown hipsters, like, you know, even the photos and everything where it looked like, you know, the Factory or something like that, where they were all drinking and surrounded by models and that whole thing. And I think that's already the image of them, and so we didn't have to do that again. So the idea of getting them out of their usual element and, you know, in the biggest Hooters in the world in Dallas, and, you know, that kind of thing just sort of takes them out of the element you're used to seeing them in. So, you know, it puts them a little bit on their heels too, because they're not really in that scenario where maybe they're more comfortable image-wise.
I think that's what we kind of strive for with the magazine, is to try to take people out of their element and give a surprising take on an artist. I mean, the idea of, like Steve said, bringing Interpol, or at least bringing one of the guys from Interpol to Hooters, which was what he suggested, bringing them into like the biggest Hooters in America, is just kind of an offbeat, eccentric way of approaching the band. And also the writer accompanies Carlos D to a dog park as Carlos lets his dog run wild with other dogs. So it's just not a side of the band you would usually see.
Aside from a trip to Hooters, the August cover story revealed something else about the band that runs contrary to the usual rock band mythology.
You know, one thing that always is, you know, something that the band addresses and that we address in this, and that it was even somewhat in the last Spin cover with Interpol, is they're very quick to deflate the myth that if you're in a band together, you're buddies. I mean, I think that's such a popular trope that, like, you know, a bunch of guys grew up together and they dropped out of school and they all jumped in a van and drove all over the place. And, you know, these guys, like, very clearly were never close friends. They were in it just to form a band, and they're in it, you know, to become a big band too. And they're very, like, open about that, and they're, you know, they were never particularly good friends, and they seem to think that they're becoming closer now. But I think it's always interesting to hear people sort of be very blunt about that kind of thing and say, yeah, we don't even really necessarily get along. So, you know, there's a lot of that in there too, because you get the sense that if for some reason this album, you know, and the whole move to Capitol, if it didn't do really well, if it wasn't very successful, these guys don't have much of a reason to be in a room together. You know, at a certain point, they're only in it for one thing. You know, it's not like they're gonna miss each other, you know, hanging out in the...
I think something else that the piece points out, and I think maybe some earlier pieces with them have pointed this out as well, but for a band that records such kind of serious, you know, sometimes gloomy music, they're actually kind of funny guys. They're not these pretentious kind of, black, men in black who just kind of mumble to themselves. They're actually kind of funny and engaging personalities. And
that's 75% true anyway.
Yeah. And in fact, someone like Carlos, whenever we've interviewed him for the magazine, he's always been kind of goofy, which is pretty amusing.
Head back to spin.com/Intel cover for more behind the scenes video from this issue.